on radio in 5, 4, 3.
I think Sam is
We are
there he is.
back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider. I had to unmute myself, but I unmuted myself. We are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at the Big1050.com. I had to respond to Craig's blasphemy against our Tigers.
Tigers lose 3 or 4 to the Gandhis. They ain't nothing.
Who's in first place? Who's in first place? Let's go check the
By
standings real
6
quick.
games.
Let's check the standings. Here we go. The Major League Baseball standings.
Yeah, I know. I admit
Let's
it.
see where
Tigers
Cleveland
are
is
good.
and where the Tigers are. Let's see.
The-
Tigers, best team in baseball. Let's see. Cleveland, not the best team in baseball. Oh my God,
Not
there's
even
6 games.
close. Not even
behind.
close. In fact, they're going to
6
finish 4th in the division.
6 games.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you
So-
did knock us off our high because the Tigers are in first place. And Yaxel Lendeborg
Yeah.
is a Wolverine.
Yep.
And I tell you what, when Michigan got the commitment from the number 1 player in the portal, Michigan fans were instantly elated. And then almost an instant after that, Seth and Craig, Michigan fans, a lot of them had cold water poured on their heads. But he'll never wind up in Ann Arbor. He'll never come here.
Hey, that's what Tim said. I mean, I was listening to Tim. I figured Tim knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, Timmy Mack was very, very skeptical for 2 reasons. And I'll introduce you guys here. Everyone knows you, but I'll introduce you anyway. For 2 reasons. Because Yaxel, he had very clear criteria. He wanted to be a first-round pick. A first-round pick, he gets a guaranteed contract. That was the standard. So it wasn't, hey, I got to be a lottery pick. It was just, I got to be a first-round pick. And if he was going to be a first-round pick, he was going to be out. And then Tim was talking to his NBA scouting friends, and they were all like, we like this guy. This is an NBA player. Looking like he's going to be a first-rounder. And then, of course, he goes to the combine. And he's like, if he shows well at the combine in any fashion, they're going to take him in the first round. All those things lined up. Seemed like he was going to go. Of course, folks, the MGoBlog Roundtable with us, 2/3 of it anyway. Seth Fisher joins us this morning. Seth, how are you?
I'm good. I'm still ready to talk Tigers, but oh my God, we got Yaxel. We got like I don't know what your message board or not even your message board. Your like Slack, your company chat, because like ours was just wall to wall, people jumping in from wherever they were, yelling Yaxel in all caps.
And then Craig Ross, who is Cleveland only when they win, which is very
No. I was a Cleveland fan for 30 years when they finished last 30 years in a row. And that's not a lie. From the day they traded Rocky Colavito, for the next 30 years, they were among the worst 2 or 3 teams in baseball year after year after year after year. And I was a fan for year after year after year. And I'm still a fan. I just can't root for the Browns because of Haslam. And they're such a moron franchise. And I love Dan Campbell. So I evolved to becoming a Lions fan, not because they're winning, although that's nice, but because the Browns are such morons. And and that's it. But I still root for the tribe or whatever you want to call them.
I will say this, and we'll get back to Yaxel. You do have some co-signers. Eric Adelson agrees with you that the Tigers will not retain Tarek Skubal.
Unlikely.
And so does Mike Spath. I think all of you are off base. You cannot let a 28-year-old superstar, best pitcher in baseball, just walk. But I digress.
Yeah.
Yaxel, just like as we talked about, you guys may remember. I said, man, he's giving signs. He's giving smoke signals that, wait, he's warming up to the idea of college basketball. Like it's not just pie in the sky. Like, he takes the official visit there's a message in that. He's getting here and he's talking about, it's not just a fallback. Because remember when he first started talking, Seth, that he framed it like, I'm gonna do the college route if I explore the pros and it's just not looking good for me. I go to the combine and I just don't do well, and it's looking like I'm gonna slip out of the first round. He didn't say those words, but that's the picture he was painting, right?
Yeah, well, it was always like an 80-20, right? Or like started 80-20. And this thing shifted as events happened with Michigan and with I don't think the NBA did anything. I think the NBA was like, okay, if I'm in the bottom of the first rounder guy, I'm probably going to the NBA. And what was he? He was kind of probably a bottom of the first rounder kind of guy, right? Like that didn't really change that much from the projections of when he left UAB. What changed was Michigan. Michigan got involved. Michigan got him on campus. When he saw Michigan, that's when things shifted. And then when he got to the NBA Combine, he was comparing that to Michigan. And you saw when he was like, maybe 60-40, maybe 50-50. But it started 80-20, which 80-20 can happen, right? But I don't think that he I don't think he shifted as far as an NBA prospect. If anything, he became a better NBA prospect because they got the measurements on him and they go, oh, that guy can probably, he can play the 4 and defend 5s. That's what we needed to know. And he had the measurements to do that. So that was the main question that he had to answer. Everything else in his game is pretty well settled, right? Like he's a big who can pass. That's what he is. And what changed, I think, is when he went to Michigan, he really saw how he could develop there. He really liked the idea of going there. I imagine, having access to a graduate education and being able to go back to that if or when the NBA is over with him, that he'll be able to come back and do that. I think he really hit it off with Dusty May and his teammates, and he really liked the idea of spending this year making a run for a championship with Michigan as opposed to kind of coming off the bench as or being knocked down, trying to learn how to be in the NBA, which he's going to have next year too. He's not going to move up or down based off of this year, right? At this point, he is the prospect that he is. I don't think he's going to be a top 15 pick. I don't think that he's going to fall to the second round or too far into the second round. He is what he is. So I think that he wanted that chance to win a championship. He saw what Jonai Broom did last year. He saw what Danny Wolf got to do last year. And I think he's like, that sounds like a much better use of my time. And I'm going to enjoy this a lot more. And the more he saw the NBA up close and actually got to compare apples to apples instead of his vision of what the NBA was, the more that Michigan recruiting trip probably did the job.
Yeah, I don't agree necessarily that he can't be a top 15 pick. I think that's potentially a reality. I've spent some time now watching his tape. If you look just at his data, you say, looks like Danny Wolf, except for two things. One is he's a much better free throw shooter. I mean, I don't know if Wolf scraped 60% last year. And
Wolf was an okay free throw shooter. You think he was better than 60%?
I think he was right around 60, actually. And
Danny, you know what Danny hit the free throw line at the end of the season, man.
Yeah,
Please don't foul that.
Yeah, and Yaxel, I can check it. And Yaxel was 76% on the year from the free throw line. So also while Yaxel didn't in the context of his team didn't have to handle the ball quite as much, he is a good ball handler, and he did do a lot of the things that you would see with Wolf, getting a rebound, bringing the ball up court. Yaxel can do that and did do that also. And he had fewer turnovers by half. And so what you've got with Yaxel is a version of Danny Wolf who shoots better at the free throw line, about the same in other elements, better at the free throw line and fewer turnovers. And I think Wolf will probably be a top 20, 25 player in the draft. So I do believe that Yaxel could be a top 15, depending on how the season goes. I like his game from what I've seen. I have, very much actually.
Yeah.
And I think his number one spot in the portal was justified. Now, that doesn't mean the rest of the team is going to look the same. I mean, it could be, last year we didn't know quite what we had. There was a lot of skepticism about Wolf playing with uh, Vlad, which I wasn't skeptical about because I went back and looked at all the Yale tape and I said, nah, this ain't a problem. And those guys can play together. And um, and that turned out to be true. Um, but still, when you put a bunch of guys together who haven't really been together, you don't really know what you've got. And to some extent, that's going to be true for this year's team. So I think it's a little premature to say, oh, yeah, we're as good as Purdue, for example, when Purdue, I think, is going to have their entire team back. Pretty much. I mean, they've got their dogs back, that's for sure. And the other thing about Michigan in particular, looking at a macro picture versus a micro picture for a moment, the last year Michigan was probably the best defensive team in their history, with the exception of the Charles Matthews, Xavier Simpson teams. And those three teams were the best team in Michigan, best defensive teams in Michigan history. Not even a question. I've seen them all, and statistically they were. And so it's hard to say how you put guys on the floor and how it works out, as a defensive matter, and without looking to the micro issues like is Cadjo, is that how you say his name, Sam?
Oh, I thought it was Cadeau.
Cadeau. Okay.
Yeah.
Cadeau is I lean to Trey over him. I like Trey better than Cadeau. I may be in a minority on that. But
I mean, I like Trey personally because I know Trey.
well, Trey is a bigger, stronger, I'm thinking better defender.
But Elliot Cadeau is a veteran
Passer.
college basketball player.
Yeah, he's a passer. He is
Not just
shooting.
a passer, he's a creator.
Yeah, he's a passer.
And I think that was really, that was a spot that they really struggled with last year.
Yeah, I agree.
Where, when Trey was creating for them, they were a complete team. But he wasn't really that.
It's
Now, he
not
could
really
have
that.
developed.
You're right.
Yeah, he could have developed into that. But like what you do in the portal days is you don't develop your talent. You go and find somebody else's guy.
Yeah, I think Trey is going to be a tremendous college basketball player, right? But he is a freshman. He is a freshman, and I think that
Wait, you're talking Trey McKinney?
Trey McKinney.
Oh,
yeah.
Not a question.
Because were you talking about Trey Donaldson?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. He was talking about Donaldson.
Okay. Oh,
yeah. Because what I was
I
saying.
understood that too.
Oh, okay.
We don't know McKinney very well yet. We're still calling him McKinney.
Okay.
Right.
We'll call him Trey after like he shoots threes. But
my bad. Okay.
Yeah.
And what I was saying was the shift to Cadeau from Trey Donaldson, to me, isn't so clear that that's a step up.
Okay.
I mean, you lose something in shooting, you lose probably something in defense, and what you gain, as Seth says, a guy who's more of a creator. And with this team, where you do have guys who can shoot it on the wing, Namari, Will Cheddar.
Roddy can shoot now, right? Like we say, like that got fixed.
Well, I don't know about Roddy. We'll see. I loved what Roddy did at the end of the year, and I love his game generally. But but McKinney can, and so they're going to have shooters on the wing, and they'll have big guys, and Cadeau is good at the lob pass. He's good at the entry pass. He's good at lobbing it in for alley-oop. So that's a strength of his game. And so this team fits for him, it would seem, until you see him play. But it is a step down in shooting and defense, because Trey Donaldson is a better shooter and a better defender, I believe, than Cadeau.
So a couple of things to get back to Yax and the criteria for his decision. I think Michigan moved his meter. more than anything.
Mhm.
And I think it maybe shifted his criteria a bit. I think it went from just being, I just want to be a first round pick. Because I think as he got into it, and I'm projecting a little bit, we'll know,
That's what we do, Sam.
yeah, we'll know once we get a chance to talk to him, right? But you got to remember when he first started talking, I just want a guaranteed contract. Well, it seems from every indication that we've gotten, whether we're talking directly to a guy who was talking to NBA scouts regularly and Tim McCormick, he's like, hey, they love this guy. Givney, who is doing the mock drafts for ESPN, they're talking to all these guys had him in the first round.
Mhm.
He was gonna get that guaranteed contract, right? Now Dusty comes on and he makes it very clear what the financials are. He's saying we beat the NBA for second round pick. We got that money. We beat him for second round picks. So he's setting the framework, giving us being very candid about that. So now you got the framework. And if you're Yaxel Lendeborg, how big is the gap between that money, say, top of the second round, and the money at the bottom, bottom of the first round? How big is that gap? Right. So you start thinking about that. He goes to the combine. That locks you in to that range, but does it really move you up into the top 20, into the teens? Probably not. No one's really talking about you in that vein. So you're locked into the, late first round. Then you go to Michigan, you look around, you love these coaches. You see that they can develop guys. Danny Wolf is going to be drafted ahead of you. Probably that's what they're talking about. Maybe you even feel like you're better than that guy. You probably feel like that. Like, man. And then on top of that, man, look at what they have coming in. We could come in, we could compete. I could compete for a championship with these guys. I could be Big Ten Player of the Year. And then maybe if they develop me like they developed these last guys, maybe I could be in the top 20 like Danny Wolf next year, and the money could be even better. I think the calculus changed a little bit. And on top of that, he goes to the combine. Who was there cheering him on?
Yeah,
These same
Dusty
coaches.
May. Yeah.
Yeah, these same coaches that are
We
recruiting.
are good. So keep in mind, we do something the NBA doesn't do, which is recruit. Right? We don't get anybody if we don't know how to convince somebody to come to our schools. And we've gotten good at this. And Dusty May is demonstrating that he's good at it. Right? That's no different than a coach sitting in a guy's all-star game, right? Like that happens all the time. And kids notice it, right? The high schoolers we know how this is done. The NBA, they didn't know that they were in a competition, right? Like if you want this guy, you're going to have to come and recruit him because we know how to recruit. We're experts in recruiting. And I think that's an underrated aspect of how this went down because Michigan has him on campus, and that was a big deal to him, right? That really shifted the needle. That really, afterwards, he came out talking like Michigan is really, this might really be an option for me. Well, what did we do? We laid out the red carpet. And when he goes to the combine is not there it's not designed to make the players want to stay in the draft. Is designed to give the teams an opportunity to get to know the players and see what they're looking at and understand what they're drafting. So they weren't putting on a show for him. They were having him put on a show for the teams. He was trying out for them. Meanwhile, you got Michigan sitting there treating him because he's a first rounder to us, right? This is a difference of 4 seeds or 5 seeds to us, right? This is a big deal to us. So we're sitting there recruiting him, and I think that made a big difference. When you're everyone's a human, right? That's how recruiting works. We all want to be wanted. And Michigan showed him, look, you get this, we're going to be this, we're going to go down this road together. And I think that was really what did it. I think Michigan knew how to move the needle. And it's a great sign for the future because it's shown that our recruiting process can work against the NBA as well. And that is a team with 32 teams we're going to want to compete with again, right? Like we're going to want to hang, the antlers of the NBA on the wall after every year and go after their guys because their guys can do a lot for us.
Yeah, I think Daniel is he's scoffing at the notion that 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 Michigan out recruited the NBA. I think that's the point. I don't think the NBA recruited him,
Yeah.
and I think that's the point. That's precisely the point. He's like, oh man, NBA's not recruiting me to be an NBA, and Michigan is all. They're like, man, come here. We're gonna pay you like an NBA player. We're gonna develop you so you can be a better NBA player and get paid more. But you know what? We're gonna cheer you on. If that's your path, if that winds up being your path, we're gonna cheer you on. So we're gonna encourage you, even if you don't come our way. That's recruiting, and I think that's the point. They're recruiting him in ways that the NBA did.
The NBA, right? And the NBA is not going to change that. They're not going to start recruiting the players because they don't care that much about the quality of player at the at the bottom rung. Now, a few teams might, right? There'll be a couple teams, I'm sure, especially championship teams, who really have an idea of what they need and see a guy and say, we want to get that guy, and they can put on the recruiting tools too. But yeah, you're right. They didn't bother. That's not their game. But it is our game, and we are good at this game. And I think that Dusty May demonstrated that he is very good at this game. And that's a really good sign, not just for Lendeborg, but for the future. I kind of wanted to talk about, because we've been just automatically comping him to Danny Wolf. I put up, when he announced he's coming to Michigan, I put up all three of those graphics that I make of the basketball player in a nutshell. And he's kind of a cross between Jonai Broom and Danny Wolf. He's not Danny Wolf exactly. Mm-hmm. He's shorter, like Broom was 6'10". I think Lendeborg is listed 6'9". His draft measurements, I think, were similar to Broom's. Danny is 7 feet tall, so he's not going to be that, and you're going to lose a little bit of just length in that regard. But his offensive rating, now granted he was playing for UAB, not in the SEC in the Big Ten, his offensive rating was a lot higher. Possession rate was just around where Danny Wolf's was. As far as the percent of his own points that he creates, Jonai Broom was way above what Lendeborg is. Lendeborg is right where Danny Wolf was, 43%, and Danny Wolf was 41% of the points that he creates for himself. Block rate, Jonai Broom is just defensively way above him. But a lot more similar kind of player to that, especially when you look at the assist rate and turnover rate, where Danny was, I think his turnover rate was higher than his assist rate. It was 23-25.
Yeah, they were very close, you're right.
Yeah, where Yaxel is a lot more like Jonai Broom, who is a 21-9, which is ridiculous. No one's going to be that. But he was 23-14, which is a really low assist rate for a guy who's a major creator. And
you mean a really low turnover rate?
Really low turnover rate, yeah. And then also his rebounding, his offensive rebounding was a lot more like Broom's. He gets after it on the boards, where Danny Wolf, I think, was like a 9% rebound.
Exactly.
So he's more. I would talk about him in terms of both those guys, because Danny, I mean, they're both kind of similar players, right? Bigs who pass. But what Danny did for us and what Broom did for Auburn, he's kind of a mix of those two guys.
Yeah, Danny, I thought one of the more surprising things at the combine was that Danny measured in at 6'10 and a half. I thought that was pretty interesting, and made what he was as a rebounder, as a tremendous rebounder, even more impressive. But I like your point. Like, he's, Yaxel is, his versatility that he brings to the table is kind of more. It's not just Danny Wolf. I like you bringing some Janai in there. I think he's going to be able to raise the defense some, but he's not just a perimeter guy. I mean, UAB, he was a guy that you probably would consider more of a post guy, more of a 5 guy. Tim size, he's probably their 5-man.
Yeah, well, he's got a face-up game. And, Danny had a little bit of one, but, you have him post up and he would just kind of dribble out and do something at the perimeter normally.
See, but
yeah,
I want to chew on this as we get to the break, because people have been talking about this. I do think that this changes the dynamics of the Big Ten immediately, like right now. For everyone who was saying it's Purdue hands down, I disagree with that. Well, I agree with that before. That is no longer the case. Like it's Purdue and Michigan all the way. Michigan is right there by virtue of Yaxel Lendeborg's addition. I know Purdue has everyone back.
But we did beat Purdue 2 games out of 3 last year too,
Yeah,
right?
but Michigan's team is far different,
It's different.
and Purdue has everyone back. So
Mhm.
there was no question that Purdue was the clear favorite before. But now Michigan has a guy, and they have all these pieces that make them before it was like, okay, they're much more formidable when it comes to defending Trey Kaufman-Renn. Like his life was going to be much more difficult before, but that's about all you could say. Who's going to score? Who's going to score on this team? Like you legitimately knew was going to go get buckets night in and night out for them. And you going against Purdue, who's that going to be? Well, now you know, and you can fill in around them. They have a guy. I think that makes all the difference in this matchup with Purdue.
Well, Purdue, the one thing that they're going to get better at is they didn't really have a backup for Trey Kaufman-Renn. And now they're going to, I think they had a 7-2 guy who was injured last year and another 7-3 guy. You know, that normal Purdue center, was it Will Berg or something?
Will Berg. Will Berg played last year.
He did, but I think that he wasn't really developed. I think he was a true sophomore and young. So like and those guys take a while, right? That sophomore to junior year jump for a big can also often be really, really important. And Riley Burgess was out too last year. You know, he's not like the biggest dude, but like that's
he played a little. But Caleb First, he graduated though, didn't he? And he was one of their starters. He was a 6'11" guy who started on that team.
I don't think Caleb First moved the needle though. Caleb First was. Do you remember like the way that we dealt with Braden Smith was just have him like dribble the ball as much as possible and let him pass it to Caleb First? Because Braden Smith would just like create a perfect shot for First, and then First would fumble the ball out of bounds or something.
Yeah, so
like I remember that guy being the weakness of the offense.
Yeah, who's gonna be? Who's gonna take the pressure off of Trey Kaufman? Because Trey Kaufman-Renn, he's got to face Maize Johnson. I mean, it's just he's not gonna be able to do what he did last year.
Yeah, he's not. Maize Johnson is a very good answer for Trey Kaufman-Renn. I just think Purdue was going to have another answer at the 5 that they didn't have last year. That was last year when you wanted to read Purdue. That's what you're going to get.
Berg transferred.
Did he transfer?
I thought he did. Maybe I'm wrong.
I remember them having another guy who got injured and didn't play last year.
They'll have some 7'3" guy from Belgium. You know that. I mean,
right. Let's just assume that Painter found a 7'3" guy from Belgium. All right. Let's not even looking at the roster.
Right.
Let's just figure there's some guy named Haga Kralanas who's going to just come out and have a 20% rebounding rate on like this is what Purdue has normally. And they didn't put that was the point. That was where their soft spot was last year. Is that if you could weather the storm of Braden Smith and then stand up physically to Trey Kaufman-Renn. Trey Kaufman-Renn was not the biggest dude, and they didn't really have that 5 who could just be a rim protector, so you could keep up with them. Right. I think once they add that Purdue is going to be a notch above where they were last year. That's not to say that they can't be worried about Michigan winning the Big Ten next year too. That's when you have teams that close to each other. It's not like, hey, Purdue is 100% going to win this league, right? Like they're in that realm.
I think Michigan, their biggest hole right now, as I look at it, and we can chew on this as they go to the break, is outside of Namari Burnett, the proven shooting on this roster is virtually non-existent. Who is it? Will Cheddar?
Well, Will Cheddar was a 40% 3 guy. So I don't think you can just say that 40% 3 guy with some volume can't shoot.
I didn't say he can, but that's really what you're looking at. Is you're looking? It's coming off the bench. Yeah. Will Cheddar is not your. I mean, that's not typically when you talk about proven shooting. You're trying to look at a starter. Right. You aren't looking at it coming off your bench. Right, that's what we're talking about with Michigan right now.
Here was something that when we first found out that we had Trey McKinney, Brian said, pencil him in for 25 minutes. And I was like, oh, come on. I don't care how good he is. He's a freshman. But then I saw him play. And I saw him play in that international game. Now, it's true, it's just one game. He was the best player on the floor. And like I said a couple of weeks ago, he got frozen out.
Well,
The dude was frozen out.
Let's pick it up on the other side, because that might be where the bench equation really helps this team a lot. And how much can they look to Yaxel in that category?
Yeah.
Can he be a real assist in that area? Is he going to be an element in that equation? Something to really chew on as we get to a break. More MGoBlog Roundtable on the other side here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at thebig1050.com.
Clear on the radio.
Yeah, it's the Roddy off-season improvement plan. You wonder what it's going to be, because I remember in the offseason thinking Roddy was going to lead the team in scoring.
I did too. I think, I'll tell you what, I think Dusty thought the same thing. I think that was, I think that was his impression.
I mean, he had the yips. That was just that happens to guys sometimes, right? But when you saw him they let him shoot through it, and you saw him get locked in, he was a fine 3-point shooter. I know he went over 2 in the last game.
Season, he was phenomenal, and you could see his release had changed. He was shooting up knuckleballs for 2 months. The ball went up and there was no rotation on it. It was just like this flat shot. And then all of a sudden the ball's spinning. The ball's spinning the way it should. And he's relaxed, and his release wasn't forced. It was nice. Here's my thought: hypnosis. I think someone hypnotized the dude, and all of a sudden, because the rest of Roddy's game is good. I mean, he gets to the basket, he gets to the free throw line, he makes his free throws. He's a great jumper. He plays hard on defense. I mean, I like Roddy's game. The only thing that was a problem was that 3-point shot was nasty for 3 months. I mean, he almost went 3 months without making one. And then all of a sudden it was like transformed overnight. Not that it went in, forget that. What does it look like? And it looked like, oh yeah, that's a shot. So
yeah, that's a big part of this of Michigan being a championship team is Roddy's got to at least shoot. I don't think he's got to be a 40% shooter, but 35% shooter, 36% shooter is where you need him to be. Kason needs to take that. I mean, we're still talking ifs, right? And that's why Purdue is probably the number one team in the Big Ten
90
start. But we're talking ifs because Michigan has a lot of potential in Kason taking a step forward next year. That's the sophomore leap, right? And you saw his shot looked good. It just kind of didn't go in, right? A lot of rim outs. That's just bad luck. That doesn't mean anything to me. I think that he's going to be a shooter. I think he's going to be a creator. I think he's going to be their second point guard when Cadeau needs to sit.
Yeah, he has to be because they don't have anybody else.
Right. And then I think Cadeau with better coaching is going to be a better player. There's a big argument. No, North Carolina doesn't know how to use it. He was not being used the way that he should be used. He's a point guard, but he's not supposed to be like
back in 30 seconds, guys.
Yeah,
he's not supposed to be the guy who just comes off a dribble and shoots all the time. So I think that there's a lot more to his game, and then that's what Michigan's offense is going to be. It's going to be tons of creation. It's going to be very Dusty May offense. It's going to be a lot of creation, and then who puts the ball in the basket? They need Roddy
coming back on the radio in about 10.
Guys, shut me up.
And we're coming back on radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at thebig1050.com. Before we get back to the roundtable, want to tell those of you who are in the market for a new vehicle, you should get on board with Brighton Ford, because Brighton Ford is the ultimate destination for your new car or truck. Head right in and settle into the seat of your favorite vehicle. Get in, take control, and drive off the lot. The car or truck that was meant for you. Go to Brighton Ford. Call 1-800-NEW-FORD or go online at BrightonFord.com and take advantage of employee pricing. You pay what we pay. From now through May 31st, well-qualified lessees can lease a 2025 Ford Explorer Active for as low as $257 a month with only $3,500 down, plus first payment, taxes, doc fee, title license, and state fees due at signing. Security deposit waive, 7,500 miles per year, 24-month lease. Call 1-800-NEW-FORD or see dealer for full details. Again, call 1-800-NEW-FORD today. Employee pricing, you pay what we pay. Brighton Ford, the official Ford sponsor of the Big 1050 WTKA. So, shooting, fellas, proven shooting. Namari Burnett, as far as starting rotation is concerned, 30-minute player. Yeah, he's the guy that you look to, that is a proven commodity in that regard. Will Cheddar in more minutes this past year gave them shooting. Does Will Cheddar play even? Is his role greater this year? We'll see. And does Michigan play a longer rotation? I wonder that. Does Michigan play a 10-man rotation? I mean, they one name we haven't mentioned, Oscar Goodman as a freshman, got in early, and Dusty seemed really intrigued with and pleased by what he's seen from him. Typically you like to stick around a 7-8 man rotation, but do they go even longer? And a longer rotation would lend itself to some guys who come in with a shooting reputation. Also in that freshman class, you mentioned Trey McKinney and then Winters Grady. Trey comes in as a physically mature, high IQ freshman. I know this kid. He's going to come in ready from that standpoint. Now, it still have to make the transition. I'm not taking it as a given that automatically happens, but assuming that he is able to, pick things up, if he can just be a guy who can knock down open shots, I think that's something that can help this team. I don't know Winters as well. I know he's a bucket getter. I know he can shoot. And on a team where that seems like it's available, at least on paper, in limited supply, that's something that the freshman class might be able to help, depending on how deep this rotation winds up going. At least it maybe even in spot duty capacity remains to be seen.
Yeah, I mean, right now we've got 12 guys. One of them is Oscar Goodman, who I don't know anything about. I know he's from New Zealand. I know he's about 6'7" or 6'8" and seems fairly sturdy. Outside of that, I don't know. I haven't seen him play, and I haven't seen him play against competition that it's plausible to judge. You've got Ricky, do I have this right? Lubard, who just showed up 2 weeks ago, I think, or so, as a sort of.
I don't think he's playing next year, man.
He
was like the first thing they said was he committed. The second thing was red shirt.
Yeah, I think that's right. I looked at some of his tape, and he's not ready, but there's a lot there. There's a lot of ability there, and so if he's a program guy, good for us, good for Dusty May, because he's a guy who can come along as time goes along. He's strong, he's big, he's physical, shows some ability to shoot the ball at 6'6", 6'7". Winters Grady, again, I don't count on him this year. When I looked at his tape, I thought stronger than Nick Stauskas, but not nearly as athletic. On the other hand, shot looks about the same. And so I think
Crazy to hear you say that about Nick, because Nick wasn't athletic as a freshman. I think
I thought Nick was very athletic.
I
I just,
I
you
did.
know,
I
you
think
know,
they did a
and
great job of building Nick up.
well, they did, but he wasn't strong. But I think Grady is stronger than what Nick was coming in. But I don't think he had the quick twitch that Stauskas had. And but Grady can shoot the ball, ain't no question. Or he shot it at the prior level and shot it at a really high level. Um, so those, I'm not counting on those three guys for next year, really. So I think you're looking at 9 guys. Now my question is uh, 2 things. One is why the centers? How come neither one of them played last year? I mean, Maize Johnson played what, 18 minutes a game, if that, 17, 18 minutes a
Well,
game?
so Maize Johnson was starting, but he got hurt. Remember,
Okay.
he had that play where he jumped out of the building on a
Yeah.
block and then and went down over the back of a Michigan State player, and
Okay.
he hurt his wrist. And so when you go and look at the KenPom numbers, it only tells you what percentage of the team's minutes he played.
Okay.
And when I calculate it, I do it by what percentage of the minutes you played in
That's
the games you
better, of
played in.
course. Yeah.
Which when you do that, he plays as much as any center. Now,
Okay.
and then UCLA was insane.
Yeah,
And
he
Mara
played
actually
10 minutes a game. He played 9 minutes against us.
That's
Yeah,
that's his
but
reason.
he also was hurt too last year, and
Yeah.
he was healthy. When Mar was healthy, they did play him a lot more, and he had up to like 36 minutes in one game. So
Yeah, he played
he
well in
can
the
actually,
Wisconsin game, and
yeah,
and
Yeah.
they won. And one of his reasons for transferring is he's like, why? Like you said, well, why am I not playing more? It's-
right.
that's why
Yeah,
he's in the
I
club.
assumed as much. I mean, the kid was a 5-star. He's 7'3", and his numbers are pretty good at UCLA, except for one thing: no minutes. And so yeah,
I mean,
I
Nick Cronin likes his power forwards, and then he yells
uh,
at them for getting beat up by Vlad Golden. I mean, what do you want? Like that was the reason he transferred it, because
that guy
UCLA didn't know how to
incidentally
use
is
him
a
right.
perfect Big Ten coach. He fits in with all the other lunatic coaches in the Big Ten, like Izzo and Underwood. I mean, he's as
Uh,
crazy as they are.
Yeah. And
I mean,
and the thing is, you got to remember, in basketball, especially in college basketball, guys get better every year, right? And the jumps can be huge. And that's why we're looking at Michigan saying that looks like a 1 seed to me. But that means, now I assume, like everybody else, I have I assume all of you have written out the minutes that you're gonna give to each guy.
I don't do that stuff. I mean, I know everybody else loves
Okay,
to
you're
do
the
that.
only
I hate
basketball
doing
fan on the
that.
planet who doesn't take his
I don't do
and to
that.
draw it out. But when I'm doing that, I figure Cadeau is going to be most of the point guard minutes, with
Hmm.
Kason taking some of those. And I don't
Yeah.
know if McKinney is going to be a point this year, or if they'll,
I don't
man,
see
like
him. I just don't see him as a point.
I think they're going to use
Sorry,
him as a two, more kind of like the way you use Kason.
he's a
But when I
2-3.
look at the way that Dusty typically plays his teams, and this goes back to his FAU teams a lot. He doesn't really have an 8-man rotation, doesn't really have a 10-man rotation. He has an 8+2. So he's got his 8 guys, and then he's got that dude who's going to be hot, right? And last year was the 2 freshmen. Last year he'd bring in Pippen when he wanted Pippen. He'd bring in Kason when he wanted Kason. It depended who was available and whatnot. But that was kind of the way he has it. He's got his guys, right? And then he's got a couple people who are possible to play if they can, if they can get over that hump. And then you can work your way into being in that main rotation as well. But I don't think he even looks at his team in terms of like, these are my starters and these are my backups and these are my bench. I think he's like, these are the people in the main rotation. These are the people that I can play and maybe they have a hot night. And then here are the people who I'm, really not playing right now. And you could play your way over the course of the season in or out of that. When I look at this roster, it looks like another 8+2, right? They're going to have to figure out where McKinney goes. I think that's going to shift as the season progresses and as he,
Agree.
loses his freshmanity and becomes
Mhm.
more of a player. And I think by the tournament, because this is a tournament team for sure, I think you're going to see a lot more McKinney. And I think that's going to mean Kayson's going to take a little bit more time at the 1. I think Kayson really, his development is going to be a huge deal for that. That's a big X factor. But if he takes that step forward as a sophomore to the point where he's like a legit starter in the Big Ten, that's a big deal. Gale, if he's making his shots, he could be one of the best players in the Big Ten. That's a big deal, right? Namari, his minutes can kind of go up and down based off of where those guys are going, but you're going to want to have Namari out there as your spacer and your leader and your defensive guy anyway. And then Grady, I think, is more of that. He's one of those extras, right? He's one of those 2 that's going to get more or less playing time based off of what he's doing. If he's knocking down 50% of his shots, though, you look at this team, it's a lot of creators, right? Cadeau is a creator. Lendeborg's a creator. Gale is a creator too. Like Kayson's a creator
Gale's
too.
a good
Like
passer.
though, well, okay, but they're guys. So Gale is a guy when you have to respect Gale's shot outside, because what they are doing is just condensing, right, and sagging off of him. When you have to come up on him, he can find his guys. He had a pretty high assist rate for what he was as a third creator. That's a very high assist rate. And Kayson's the same, and that's just the way that Dusty May plays. But you gotta have to have somebody who can knock down shots. And last year, Namari was the best they had. So I think that Grady's got a path to playing time, because they just need someone who's going to knock it down. And sometimes the 5th guy's going to have to be that.
I'm looking at Kayson. I'm looking at LJ Kayson as you talk about leap from year 1 to year 2, as the guy, the backcourt guy that is the only real semblance of a guy who can get downhill without a ball screen. We kind of saw that in the A&M game, for instance, really be on full display, without assist from a jump shot, right? That if that part of his game comes around where he's able to knock down jumpers with some more consistency, he gives you that off the bounce creativity that we saw with more consistency as well. You pair that with another guy that can be a bucket getter, be your go-to guy in Yaxel. You have those 2 components. Yax as a front court guy, that's a bucket getter, and then LJ Kayson, if he can emerge as that guy in the backcourt that can, because I think you got to have that, and I don't think that's a bridge too far to be asking that of him in year 2. That's a big deal for Michigan, and I think a lot is riding on that, and I'm expecting him to make that leap.
I hope so. I liked what he did last year. I thought he started sort of hot, he plateaued, and then he kept progressing throughout the year. So, and it would be an ordinary progression for a backcourt player, actually.
Yeah.
So, Sam, one last thing. Malik Cordell. When I didn't think we were getting Yaxel, I spent some time looking at his tape because there was some noise about him. Do you know about this guy?
So,
okay.
Okay.
All right.
So,
well, I'll save it. I'll save it.
Next edition of the MGoBlog Roundtable. That'll do it for us this week. We'll see you next time on the Michigan Insider on the Big 1050 WTKA, online at thebig1050.com.